Good afternoon to you, and welcome back to today's JRPG Weekly Update Extra Edition. Guys, I need to start off today's episode by saying this is not a defense of Nintendo. They're doing some skeevy stuff right now, but I'm wanting to disambiguate what's actually going on with their whole patent thing, because to hear the internet talk about it, it sounds like they've just secured a patent that will give them a monopoly on summoning creatures for the foreseeable future. And what really happened is a little bit different from that. And honestly, a lot of people are getting got by this. I almost got by this myself. I actually already made a whole other video today talking about how mad I was about Nintendo and how now things are gonna be, irreparably harmed, and there will be irreparable harm in the future, sure, but I think that it's important to really understand the nature of the bad, so that when we do complain about this, we'll be complaining for reasons that are true. And I don't know about you guys or not, but I care about whether or not the things I believe are true. So as a result, let's just take a look at this headline first that I first saw on Reddit, and what got me all worked up first thing. All right, here's the headline. Nintendo and the Pokémon Company was granted a US patent on summoning a character and letting it fight another. So that sounds pretty bad. And it is, but that's the headline here, okay? That's not the whole story. But that's sort of the nature of a headline, right? You have to include some information, but you can't include the whole damn paragraph, right? So I'll cut him some slack here. I don't think that this was necessarily intentionally written to sound like the end of the world. So let's just take a look at what happened here. Last week, Nintendo and the Pokémon Company received a US patent on summoning a character and letting it fight another. So if we scroll on down, we'll see some text, a lot of words, and then some patents that you can actually read through if you'd like. Well, first of all, it's Reddit, so I know that they're not gonna read the patent either. Here's the thing, guys, you don't have to read all of the patent, but if you do, you'll see stuff that reads like radio instructions. This is probably what my grandparents would hear if I were to try to describe to them what a JRPG is. Here's the important part, because the writers of the story actually did the hard work of reading through the patents themselves to see if there was anything here of concern. And there is, but it's not the concern that you think it is, okay? Let's walk through the summary together and figure out where is the bad, okay? For this patent to apply to anything, it has to meet all of the conditions here, okay? And then Nintendo could potentially sue someone for patent infringement, okay? The first one is you must be on a PC or a console. Duh, it's a video game, cool, let's move on. The second one, you must move the character around in a virtual space. Okay, that's pretty much every video game ever. So it sounds pretty bad, but then here's 3. You must be able to summon a character. Now, please note, they have not mentioned anything about being in combat yet, but you must be able to summon a character. They call it a sub-character in this game, Nintendo does, but that could be a Pokemon or some other character. For example, a little monster such as a Pokemon that the player might have at its disposal. In SMT terms, this would be a demon that you could summon, or in RoboTrek, maybe a robot that is in your capsule. Or in Brainlord, this could be your fairy that's in Amber. So we have options here. So as soon as you summon one of these, though, the logic branches out. The first one is you're in a virtual world, there is a monster nearby, and you pull out a monster and they begin fighting, okay? That's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2, no other character to fight in the vicinity. So you just summon your critter, they're out hanging out in the world with you. Cool. And then the third, this is about sending the character in a direction and doing auto battles autonomously. What I'm getting from this is that this isn't the carte blanche patent to own summoning a Pokemon or a character like a Pokemon. This is specifically trying to patent the sort of gameplay mechanics of the Pokemon Legends Arceus series or games. Where you have a character out in the world, you summon a Pokemon, he can hang out with you. If there's a nearby monster, he'll fight it. And you could also just say, hey, you go off in that direction and just do some auto battling. So that's pretty different from what everybody else is kind of concerned about at this point. Obviously, Shin Megami Tensei does not do anything of the sort. None of the other Pokemon likes that I know do anything of that particular style and variety, unless you include Palworld, who is obviously the target of Nintendo's ire at this point in time. So, what does this mean for Palworld? Well, they were granted this, and it's that sort of patent that's happened in Japan that's allowed them to harass the developers of Palworld so much in Japan at this point. And so this obviously just gives them more ammo to take that across the pond should they so desire. So this was accepted without any call for revision or narrowing of the definition at any point by the patent office. So what that means is they have this patent and it goes until like 2043 or something, 20 years after it was filed, which was initially like a couple of years ago, but it's been accepted now. Now, I don't think this is going to have an immediate impact on anybody's ability to make a Monster Trainer game as we know them today, but what it is going to do is affect other developers' abilities to move the series forward in the way that we've practically been begging Nintendo to do for Pokemon for ages now. Now Nintendo, now that they've finally done what we've been asking them to do by creating the Arceus games, an open world Pokemon, we'll take that now, that's ours, and nobody else gets to do what we do now. I don't like that at all, and I think it's pretty rich coming from Nintendo, who borrowed heavily from Dragon Quest, who borrowed heavily from Shin Megami Tensei to make Pokemon in the first place. By the way, Megami Tensei came out in 1987 in Japan. Nintendo is actually pretty late to the party, maybe not as late as Digimon, say, but still late enough that there's no way that they could really patent what I think a lot of people are afraid of them patenting. Nobody else has done anything like that so far, besides maybe Palworld, but that's kind of a moot point because now they cannot do anything like that in the future should they have wanted to. Imagine Shin Megami Tensei 6 may have already been in development, and maybe they were going to have a mechanic where you could have demons that were in your party go off and hang out next to you as you walk around the world, or maybe go do some auto battling without you. Well, now that is no longer a possibility. Same again with Digimon. You know, if the next Digimon game was going to have a character that you could hang out with you and send him off in a different direction and just kind of asynchronously do some combat, yeah, that's no longer on the table according to this patent. So while summoning a creature is maybe not necessarily a thing that was actually patented by Nintendo, despite the way some people are reacting to it, it's still bad. And you should still not want Nintendo to be engaging in this sort of anti-competitive market practice. They're already doing anti-consumer things. Now they're doing anti-developer things, anti-indie things, and I think that that's really bad for the industry as a whole, because Nintendo is notorious for weaponizing and being very litigious. They have a long history of leveraging lawsuits and bureaucracy against us, against not just us like me and you, but also other developers and competitors. Now, I don't necessarily think that Pokemon or Nintendo would sue Atlas for making a Shin Megami Tensei that had this sort of feature or mechanic. Probably not Bandai Namco either because, well, let's be real, they have the coffers to actually fight Nintendo in a lawsuit and win and overturn this really terrible patent. So Nintendo is specifically forging this as a weapon to be used against smaller developers. And that is really shitty. And I think that that is what we should all be really angry about here. Not, oh, look at Nintendo, they think they own summoning and capturing and battling creatures. That's not what's happening here. They are stifling creativity in the industry, and now that Nintendo has finally taken the step toward a more open world style of Pokemon game that allows you to capture and battle creatures out in the real world, they are shutting that door behind them despite being highly derivative works of their own. And there's nothing wrong with work being derivative, but it is wrong to borrow heavily from those who inspire you and then try to pull up the ladder once you're already at the top of the game. Pokemon is a multi-billion dollar, with a B, multi-billion dollar IP franchise, okay? They are the big dog. They are the biggest franchise in the world right now, and yet they are using their status not to make better games. No, it's not being used towards that ends at all. It is, all right, how do we get rid of the little guys making us look bad? Here's the thing, I've never played Palworld, so I don't really have a horse in this race, or maybe the more apt analogy is I don't have a dog in this dogfight I don't like the fact that Nintendo and Pokemon are no longer focused on trying to innovate or create better products, but rather trying to capture a market by pushing other people down, keeping other people out of their area, and cordoning off the space. Oh, this is mine until 2043. This is not the first time that a gameplay mechanic has been patented. Namco, by the way, patented putting minigames in your loading screens, which is why loading screens were boring and plain for ages. And by the time that patent finally expired, nobody even had loading screens anymore. And by the way, Namco barely ever even used that patent. It's the dumbest thing. And same with Nintendo. They're probably barely ever going to even use that patent, but what they are going to do is use it as a cudgel, and that sucks. And the way that Nintendo is going at this point, guys, I might still get a Switch 2 at some point to support developers for that console, but at this point, I don't think I'm ever going to review a Nintendo product ever again.